mountain pass is empty now. Wind moves through stone corridors where once 10,000 messengers rode in organized rotation. No army held this ground. No fortress guarded these heights. Yet for centuries, commands flowed through here with the precision of blood through veins, carrying the will of distant emperors to the edges of known civilization. History celebrates the conqueror, the general, the warrior king. We build monuments to those who took power by force and held it through fear. But there exists another kind of empire, one that does not announce itself with trumpets or cavalry charges. One that does not need to. These empires understood something profound, that true power is not the capacity to destroy, but the capacity to organize. They discovered that a well-designed system can outlast any army. That paperwork, properly administered, is more permanent than stone. That a census is more powerful than a sword. In the administrative halls of ancient capitals, far from battlefields, empires were built not through conquest, but through coordination. Scribes, not soldiers, became the architects of control. The ledger replaced the legion. And in doing so, these civilizations achieved something remarkable. They made dominion efficient, predictable, and most disturbing of all invisible to those being dominated. This is the story of empires that conquered through order, through systems so intricate, so thoroughly embedded in daily life, that resistance became not just futile, but unthinkable. Where rebellion meant not fighting soldiers, but fighting against the very structure of existence itself. The question is not how they were defeated. The question is how they were built at all, and whether, in our modern world of systems and networks, we have truly escaped their shadow, or merely perfected their methods. Chapter 1. The Persian Model. The Achaemenid Persian Empire stretched from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean. Darius I controlled more territory than any ruler before him. Yet remarkably, his standing army was relatively small for an empire of such scale. The secret lay elsewhere. In 522 BCE, Darius implemented a system that would define imperial administration for millennia, the royal road. This was not merely infrastructure. It was the physical manifestation of bureaucratic power, stretching over 2,500 kilometers from Susa to Sardis. The road enabled messages to traverse the empire in 7 days, a speed unmatched until the industrial age. But the road was meaningless without what traveled upon it. Darius established the Angarium relay system of mounted couriers stationed at regular intervals. Each messenger rode their segment, then passed the dispatch to the next. The system never slept. It never wavered. Herodotus observed with amazement. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. This was administration as infrastructure. Information became power, and Darius controlled the flow absolutely. The empire was divided into satrapies, administrative provinces overseen by appointed governors. But here, Darius revealed his genius. He did not trust the satraps. Instead, he created a parallel system. The king's eyes and ears, imperial inspectors who traveled unannounced, auditing provincial administration, verifying tax collection, ensuring loyalty. The satraps governed, but they were governed in turn. Taxation itself became an instrument of control. Rather than arbitrary tribute, Darius implemented standardized tax rates based on agricultural assessment. Each satrapy knew exactly what it owed. Predictability replaced chaos. The system was fair enough to be accepted, rigid enough to be inescapable. The Persians did not conquer through military superiority alone. They conquered through predictability, through the certainty that every decree would be enforced, every tax collected, every provincial governor monitored. The empire functioned like a machine, impersonal, tireless, inevitable. When Alexander invaded, he did not dismantle this system. He inherited it, because what the Persians built was too useful to destroy. Chapter 2. Rome's invisible chains. Rome is remembered for legions, for gladiators and aqueducts and marble forums. But the true genius of Roman power was not architectural or military. It was administrative. By the 2nd century CE, Rome controlled territory from Britain to Mesopotamia. Approximately 50 million people lived under Roman authority. Yet the actual Roman administration consisted of perhaps 300 to 400 officials. How does an empire govern 50 million people with fewer bureaucrats than a modern city employs? The answer is elegant and ruthless. Rome did not govern directly. Rome made others govern themselves under Roman supervision. The empire was divided into provinces, each overseen by a governor. But beneath this top layer existed a complex web of local councils, municipal magistrates, and urban elites who handled day-to-day administration. These were not Roman appointees. They were local aristocrats, elevated to positions of authority within the Roman system. This was colonization by co-option. Rome identified existing power structures and integrated them into imperial administration. Local elites gained status, wealth, and protection. In exchange, they collected taxes, maintained order, and ensured loyalty. The empire became self-administering. But Rome's true innovation was the cursus publicus, the imperial postal and transport system. Like the Persian royal road, but more extensive, more formalized, more permanent. Relay stations dotted every major route. Official couriers carried not just messages, but authority itself. Imperial decrees, legal judgments, military orders all flowed through this network with mechanical efficiency. The system required infrastructure, roads. Rome built over 250,000 miles of paved roads. But these were not built for commerce or convenience. They were built for control. Troops could move rapidly to suppress rebellion. Information could flow to Rome from any corner of the empire within weeks. Governors knew they were being watched, even from 2,000 miles away. And then there was the census. Every 5 years, Roman authorities conducted a comprehensive population survey. Every household registered. Every taxable asset recorded. The census was not bureaucratic pedantry, it was a map of power. Rome knew exactly how many people it controlled, where they lived, what they owned, and therefore what they could pay. Tax collection became scientific. The publicani private contractors collected revenue on behalf of the state. This outsourcing of enforcement meant Rome could extract wealth without maintaining a vast bureaucracy. The system paid for itself while funding legions, infrastructure, and the machinery of empire. Rome did not need to garrison every province with soldiers. The administrative apparatus itself became the occupation. Rebellion meant fighting not just legions, but paperwork, legal systems, tax records, contractual obligations. Most people never saw a Roman soldier. They saw tax collectors, magistrates, municipal officials, all operating within Roman law, enforcing Roman order. The empire became ambient, inescapable not through force, but through ubiquity. Chapter 3. China's Eternal Examination. In 605 CE, the Sui dynasty formalized a system that would define Chinese imperial governance for 13 centuries, the Imperial Examination System. This was not an innovation. It emerged from earlier traditions, but its formalization created something unprecedented in human history. The examination system established a single criterion for political power, demonstrated mastery of Confucian classics. Birth, wealth, military prowess all became secondary to performance on written tests. The state recruited administrators not from aristocratic families, but from anyone capable of passing increasingly difficult examinations. This had profound implications. It meant that every ambitious family, regardless of status, had incentive to educate their sons. Literacy spread. Confucian ethics became universal. The entire population internalized the intellectual framework that justified imperial rule. The empire did not merely govern through bureaucracy. It governed through education that created bureaucrats. The examination system had multiple tiers: local exams, provincial exams, metropolitan exams, palace exams. Each level filtered candidates. Only a tiny fraction reached the top. Those who succeeded entered the Mandarin class, the scholar officials who administered the empire. This bureaucratic elite was meritocratic, yet ruthlessly hierarchical. Officials were rotated between posts to prevent local power bases. They were monitored by census officials whose sole function was to investigate other officials. Corruption, inefficiency, deviation from protocol, all were documented, reported, punished. The system was self-replicating. Successful officials educated their sons. Those sons took examinations. Some passed, some failed, but all absorbed Confucian values emphasizing loyalty, hierarchy, and proper conduct. The examination system did not just select bureaucrats. It produced citizens who understood their place within imperial order. China's bureaucratic apparatus was staggeringly large. By the Ming Dynasty, approximately 20,000 scholar officials administered a population exceeding 100 million. But beneath them existed a vast network of clerks, scribes, runners, and local functionaries, perhaps 10 times as many, all operating within standardized procedures. The empire maintained detailed records, population registers, land surveys, tax assessments, granary inventories, water management logs. Everything was documented, categorized, filed. The state knew exactly what resources it controlled and could mobilize them with terrifying efficiency. During famines, the state opened granaries in affected regions. During floods, it mobilized labor for dike repair. This was not benevolence, it was system maintenance. A well-fed, stable population was more productive, more taxable, less rebellious. The bureaucracy managed society like farmers manage fields. China's military was formidable, but the empire's stability derived from administration. Regional governors could not easily rebel because the system was designed to prevent consolidation of power. Officials were transferred regularly. Local military forces were commanded by generals subordinate to civilian administrators. Authority was fragmented, monitored, contained. The examination system created an empire that did not need a single great leader. The system itself was the leader. Emperors came and went, some brilliant, some incompetent, some insane, but the bureaucracy continued. Policies were implemented. Taxes were collected. Order was maintained. This was governance that transcended individuals. The empire became immortal because it was not embodied in any person. It was embodied in a system that reproduced itself generation after generation. Chapter 4. The Ottoman Apparatus. When Mehmed II conquered Constantinople in 1453, he inherited not just a city, but an administrative tradition stretching back to Rome and Byzantium. The Ottomans did not discard this legacy. They systematized it. The Ottoman Empire governed through a complex hierarchy of bureaucratic offices, each with clearly defined responsibilities. At the top sat the Sultan, but day-to-day governance fell to the Grand Vizier and the Divan, the Imperial Council. Beneath them, a vast apparatus of officials managed everything from taxation to military recruitment to religious endowments. The empire's administrative innovation was the millet system. Rather than imposing uniform governance, the Ottomans allowed religious communities to administer their own affairs under Ottoman supervision. Christians, Jews, and Muslims each had separate legal systems for personal matters: marriage, inheritance, religious disputes. This pluralism was not tolerance, it was efficiency. The empire delegated governance to communities, then held community leaders accountable. But the Ottomans' most distinctive bureaucratic mechanism was the devshirm, the child levy. Christian boys from conquered territories were recruited, converted to Islam, and trained for imperial service. This created a bureaucratic and military elite with no local loyalties, no family networks, no competing allegiances. They owed everything to the Sultan. These Capiculu slaves of the port became the empire's administrative backbone. They staffed the bureaucracy, commanded the janissary corps, governed provinces. They were meritocratic within their own hierarchy, rising through demonstrated competence. Yet they could never threaten the sultan's authority because they owned nothing, had no independent power base. The empire maintained meticulous records. The Tahrir Defterleri cadastral surveys documented every village, every household, every taxable resource. Conducted regularly, these surveys enabled precise taxation while providing detailed intelligence about the empire's human and economic geography. Provincial administration was similarly formalized. Governors, tax collectors, judges all operated within standardized procedures. Appointments were temporary. Audits were frequent. The central administration in Constantinople maintained control not through direct governance, but through systematic oversight. The Ottoman postal system ULEK connected the capital to distant provinces. Messages traveled via mounted couriers along established routes. Like Persia and Rome before them, the Ottomans understood that communication infrastructure was the foundation of administrative control. But the empire faced a paradox. As territories expanded, bureaucratic complexity increased. More officials meant more opportunities for corruption, inefficiency, and local autonomy. The system that enabled expansion eventually constrained it. By the 17th century, the empire's bureaucratic apparatus had become so elaborate that reform became nearly impossible. The machine that built the empire became the cage that trapped it. Chapter 5. The Machinery of Inevitability. What united these empires? Persia, Rome, China, the Ottomans, was a recognition that enduring power does not flow from the barrel of a gun. It flows from the stroke of a pen. They understood that administration is violence by other means. When a census records your name, your household, your property, the state is asserting ownership over your existence. When a tax collector arrives with documented authority, backed by legal procedures and official seals, resistance requires rejecting the entire conceptual framework that makes authority legitimate. Few can do this. These empires did not conquer through superior force alone. They conquered through superior organization. They built systems that outlasted dynasties, that survived military defeats, that persisted through periods of chaos. Because once a bureaucracy embeds itself in society, it becomes nearly impossible to remove without destroying society itself. The genius was making resistance impractical, not through terror, but through dependency. Cities relied on imperial trade networks. Agriculture depended on state-maintained irrigation. Legal disputes required imperial courts. Credit flowed through state-regulated banking. The empire became the infrastructure of daily life. To rebel was to reject not just authority, but functionality itself. And always there were records. Every transaction documented. Every official action logged. The archive was memory, and the empire never forgot. Your grandfather's tax debt. Your family's land holdings 3 generations past. The minor legal infraction committed decades ago. The bureaucracy maintained continuity across time, creating obligations that transcended individual lives. This is why these empires proved so durable. Armies could be defeated. Cities could fall. But the administrative apparatus, the tax records, the legal codes, the standardized procedures persisted. Conquerors found it easier to inherit the system than to build a new one. Alexander kept the Persian satrapy structure. Germanic tribes maintained Roman legal codes. The Mongols adopted Chinese bureaucratic methods. The Republic of Turkey inherited Ottoman administrative divisions. The system survives because the system works. Final chapter. The weight of what remains. We know that bureaucratic empires achieved something military empires could not: longevity without continuous conquest. Rome's administrative framework persisted for centuries after its military power collapsed. China's examination system endured through multiple dynasties until 1905. Ottoman administrative structures influenced the modern Turkish state. We know these empires governed vast populations with relatively small administrative apparatus, achieving efficiency through standardization and delegation. They created systems that were self-replicating, self-monitoring, and resistant to individual corruption or incompetence. We know that bureaucracy, once established, becomes extraordinarily difficult to dismantle. It creates dependencies, both material and conceptual. People rely on its services. Society organizes around its structures. Even those who suffer under it cannot imagine alternatives. What remains uncertain is whether bureaucratic governance represents evolution or stagnation. These empires were stable, but were they progressive? They provided order, but did they allow for meaningful change? The examination system perpetuated Confucian orthodoxy for centuries. Ottoman administrative conservatism hindered adaptation to European military innovations. Roman bureaucracy could not solve the problems that led to collapse. We also cannot fully know how individuals experienced bureaucratic empire. Records document systems, not subjective experience. Did people feel oppressed by administrative oversight, or did they appreciate the order it provided? Was taxation seen as theft or as the price of civilization? The archives are silent on this. What matters, what continues to matter, is that these empires discovered a fundamental truth, that human societies can be governed through organization as effectively as through force. That systems, properly designed, can control populations more thoroughly than armies ever could. Modern states have perfected what ancient empires pioneered. We live within bureaucratic systems vastly more elaborate than anything Rome or China achieved. Every citizen is documented, tracked, taxed, regulated. Our movements are recorded. Our communications are logged. Our transactions are monitored. The state knows more about us than we know about ourselves. The question is not whether bureaucratic governance is possible. History answered that definitively. The question is whether such governance is compatible with human freedom, or whether freedom itself is merely another administrative category, granted or revoked by systems too large to resist. The ancient empires built machines that governed millions. We have inherited those machines. They are more sophisticated now, more efficient, more comprehensive. But the fundamental mechanism remains unchanged. Power through organization, control through documentation, dominion through paperwork. The mountain pass is empty now, but the messengers still ride. They carry different documents, travel different roads. But the messages remain the same. You are known, you are numbered, you are governed. The empire never fell. It evolved.